You personally to reach this milestone 6 years into your career?
Means a lot, man. Means a lot. It's not easy. It was very hard road, very hard. But we are here. Obviously we're not done. We need four more, but I think today we all deserve to enjoy this win.
The Dallas Mavericks crushed their way to the NBA Finals with epic performances from Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving as they take out the Minnesota Timberwolves in 5 games to advance to the NBA Finals. This is Inside the Mavs. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining us here on this episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel. And you can follow me on Twitter as well, at Kevin Gray Sports. Grant Afseth of Mavs Sports Illustrated covering the Dallas Mavericks here on the episode with me in Minnesota after the Mavericks take out the Minnesota Timberwolves 124-103. Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving combining for 72 points. Luka Dončić, your Western Conference Finals MVP. Grant, what's going on, man? How we doing?
I'm doing pretty well. That was definitely the most entertaining, interesting post game that I've ever been a part of. So, well, aside from the one in Oklahoma City, where someone forgot they were on the Bluetooth or they were pulling a prank, but this one definitely passes that one.
Yeah, and the celebration obviously on for these Mavericks as they make the NBA Finals for the 3rd time in franchise history, the first time since 2011, where, of course, they won their one and only championship in franchise history. But, Grant, this was a game where their superstars carried them and powered them to this win, and particularly Luka Dončić, who set the tone in the first quarter, 20 points in that first quarter for Dallas, outscoring Minnesota by himself, of course, going 4 of 6 from downtown, 8 of 11 from the field. Just describe to me the atmosphere in the building and how quickly Luka took the air out of the building with his spectacular first quarter that he had and how he was able to get things going offensively for the Mavericks there.
Yeah, definitely by halftime, there was already some boos from Minnesota fans going at their own team. And it was, it just, they never really got back into it for obvious reasons. But yeah, it was very wild how fast the game just really shifted to this is almost a formality at this point.
And for Luka, I mean, getting off to that hot start, 8 of 11 from the field, and you could tell that there was a special aggressiveness that he was coming out with, and his shot was falling early. And for the Mavericks, that really just set the tone from there. He was the only one in double figures, obviously going a plus 16. But what did you see specifically that really got him going, whether it be some of the actions that they got going for him or him just making a decision to say, I'm going to take this game over from the outset and set the tone for this team offensively here?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of everything. I think with the way, kind of what we talked about after last game, they kind of came out with that same approach defensively for the Timberwolves where, Jaden McDaniels started out on Kyrie, Anthony Edwards started out on Luka. And I think one of the things that you get out of that is Luka is able to get to his spots. I think what we've seen in this series is just, Jaden McDaniels probably did the best job, I would say, of like the ball screen coverages. But, Kyle Anderson probably did the best job of like isolation defense, which he saw later in that first quarter and still made him pay. But I thought he was really able to get to his spots and ball screens. And just overall, when you have Kyle Anderson going under a screen and your feet are on the center court logo and you pull up and knock down that shot. I mean, There's really nothing else. Like I've seen so
pretty
many
damn
like
demoralizing is what it is.
yeah, it's demoralizing, and that just like is the ultimate "this man's on a heater" situation there. And I just saw a lot of commentary actually throughout the series from people who are like, "Why don't you just go under those screens?" Well, I mean, that's kind of
why you don't.
Yeah, that's sometimes it's as easy as just shot making, and as we talked about, giving great players, the same look, same matchups. If you're going to basically let them review game 4 and then come out in game 5 and be like, all right, I got something for you. You're still going to do that? That's pretty much how it felt with Kyrie and Luka. And they responded, and it looked a lot like that, that game 3 performance where they each had 30 plus points. But obviously, Luka was just on a heater so early that this was definitely one of those memorable, iconic playoff moments where you also start to think back to the whole, things that really make up Luka's dominance. His ability to respond after a playoff loss. He's the all-time leading scorer in playoff history for points per game in those situations. He had 36. And then also someone who rises to the occasion on the road and relishes in those moments. And then also for Kyrie Irving's sake, I think he's now 15-1 in closeout games, if I remember correctly.
Right.
So yeah, like definitely 2 elite, fantastic, all-time great caliber players just doing what they, have typically do in big moments.
Yeah, the Mavericks found themselves tied at 18 in the first quarter with 5:45 left, and they began what was a 17-1 run to end the final near 6 minutes of that first quarter. And we talked about it on the last episode. You can't necessarily win a game in the first quarter, but you damn sure can lose one in the first quarter. And that's exactly what it felt like for Minnesota, because the way that the Mavericks got after them offensively, and for the Timberwolves, at one point, they went 10 straight possessions without a point, not a basket, without a point for 10 straight possessions. In fact, that included 7 straight missed shots as the Mavericks were finally able to continue to put it on them in that first quarter. And just the array of shot making from Luka in that first quarter. You mentioned the logo 3 that he had, whether it was getting into the lane with the floaters, whether it was the 3-pointers, it was just the total package of his game being displayed on this stage. And you're right, based off of what he's been able to do responding off of losses, this is a guy that simply relishes that moment in that environment. And he got going, picking on Snoop Dogg, picking on fans, whomever you wanted to see. Luka was picking on all of them. And for some reason, he just loves to rise to the occasion in these moments. And he did it once again in game 5.
Absolutely. And if you think back to what we've discussed as well, too, before the series started, we talked about how some of those dry spells for Minnesota's offense are just so dreadful at times where,
Yes.
they play high level defense, but sometimes they're scoring like they're barely grazing 100 points. That was one of those weird, like every team has flaws, but like that was one of those like flaws a lot of people talked about with this Timberwolves team, during the regular season, where they just have some, weird, dry spells offensively. And he had 19 points in the first quarter. And, Rudy Gobert, the, leader in field goal attempts in that first quarter as well, too. Not necessarily what you're looking for to close the team out or survive being the team that gets closed out, I should say. And, just also what we talked about this last episode after a loss, the difference shot making makes for all facets of the game. Luka was obviously the leader of that with 8 of 11 in the first quarter. But when a team shoots 14 to 23 from the floor and they're not really like turning it over frequently, like that was an issue last game, you're just not giving up like open court, like change of possession opportunities for the other team to attack and get into a rhythm. They're taking it out of the net and they're having to attack a set defense. And that set defense involved, over 5 minutes of Derek Lively in the first quarter, when they were setting that tone, and then throughout the night. And, Daniel Gafford played 6 minutes, 44 seconds in that first quarter. So that just kind of gives you the idea of depth, that Dallas had in the center position to be able to anchor the paint and make it really hard on Minnesota, giving us that look back to what it was like earlier in the series, outside of the one game that they didn't have Lively available. But then also Maxi Kleber was able to play more at the 4 instead of having to help the Mavericks survive at the 5 without, Derek Lively available like last game. So just a lot of things that really showed the identity, like kind of getting back to it with having a full, set of personnel, and then just kind of the look ahead at potential by being able to play big, with Maxi next to, shot blockers. I just thought overall, all of this stuff, really, kind of tied together nicely for, the Mavericks to be able to pull off such a, pivotal win.
Yeah, and a dominant one at that to move on to the NBA Finals. More on this Game 5 win for the Mavericks as they move on to the NBA Finals and the key players outside of Luka and Kyrie that really made a difference in this game to get them to the NBA Finals. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast. Let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs as the Mavericks crushed the Timberwolves 124-103 to move on to the NBA Finals. Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving combining for 72 points in Game 5 to be able to move on. And Grant, before we went to break, obviously Luka and Kyrie are going to get the headlines for this game, and we'll get to more, especially with Kyrie here in just a moment. But you mentioned a little bit earlier, and we can't go any further without talking about the return of Derek Lively, the 20-year-old rookie coming back after spraining his neck in Game 3 in the second quarter, missed Game 4, returned for Game 5, and he and Daniel Gafford were absolutely terrific. You look at the numbers between the two of them, they went a combined 6 of 6 from the field, what was to be 20 points, and what would be 17 rebounds and 3 block shots combined between the two of them. That combination has been so vital and so good for this team in the second half of the year since acquiring Gafford, obviously, that the difference, I'm astounded at the difference that this Mavericks team identity-wise plays with when Lively is not there versus when he is, and he was a major factor once again in Game 5 for the Mavericks.
It just makes such a massive difference when you have, his size, his length, his quickness, and his energy. Like we keep saying it. I'm sure you could take clips of us talking about Derek Lively, copy and paste it in here, and it would just be the same over and over again. That's just how valuable that he's been. 3 block shots. But, when you look past that, there was a lot of just pressures at the rim. And he just frustrates, opposing players. And, there was a very clear difference in, aggression in the half court. It's important to decipher, transition in half court when there's open floor opportunities. But when, Lively was in position to really anchor, the paint, I thought there was, aggression differences compared to that, that loss previously, which is exactly what you want with the rim protector. And then it really just pops with that tandem, just how, threatening they are as lob threats. Like it just takes a little bit, like a sliver of, a late reaction, and the passing talent on his team is ridiculous, and the finishing talent is as well. And it's a lethal combination. And when those shot creators like Luka and Kyrie get it going on those off the dribble shots, it just becomes so threatening to have to account for that, and the back end of that play with the play finishers like Lively and Gafford. They just leap off the floor so fast. And overall, like against a team like Minnesota, where you would think that would be more so neutralized or have the best option to do so with their rim protection, regular season defense, with the 4-time defensive player of the year, that's just a real impressive sign for an identity when you can make that pay and beat that team pretty handily in a playoff series.
Yeah, and the physicality, and that's been a buzzword that's been throughout the course of this postseason, but it really has been a difference maker for this team, their ability to play big. And when you have Gafford and Lively being able to come off the bench for one another, particularly Lively obviously coming in for Gafford, it just slides everyone into their natural position. You mentioned a little bit earlier with Maxi Cleveland being able to play the 4. He's not playing necessarily quote-unquote out of position because he can play small ball 5, but ideally when you've got Gafford and Lively, you can have one of them on the floor at the same time, and your matchups are just so much better and so much easier when you've got one of those two on the floor. And you saw that in game 5. And we've talked to Derek Lively a lot throughout the season. I'm just so impressed by the way he handles himself, the maturity at which he plays the game with. And as you've mentioned before, the ability to absorb and learn information, process it, and then be able to activate it in games so quickly is very rare. And I think for him, he's going to be a star for years to come. If he's having this kind of effect now on this team, it's going to be frightening the next year, in a couple of years, 3 years from now, how much better he's going to be and what he's going to be for this team eventually as the starter for them going down the road. But he's playing his role perfectly based on what this team is right now, what they're asking him to do here.
It's honestly pretty wild to think the progression that he's made from a development standpoint, and just how much of a leadership on court, like communicator he's been from day one. Cause I remember watching his film from Duke, and it was like, wow, unless that's a dunk, he's really not making the left hand hook, the right hand hook, the anything that wasn't a dunk type of shot, anything you want to call it. And I thought it was kind of funny too, because I have a story coming out later at some point. But basically, I was talking to him about like the skill development that he's done, since the start of basically joining the Mavericks organization. And he works a lot with assistant coach Sean Sweeney. And he said, before I started working with Sean, I couldn't make a left-hand hook. He said, well, not actually a right-hand one either. So, so I thought that was kind of funny. It's just like the level of development and humility that he has too. Like it's very wild how just talking with him ever since he got to Vegas for Summer League. He's been his wisdom is way beyond like his years. Like it's crazy to think that you're talking to a 19 and then now a 20-year-old when you're talking to him and hearing him lead on the court and make an impact. Because you're right, he's got to add more muscle to his frame, and naturally he's going to be able to be even more physically imposing. And that's a very scary thought, because you don't really see many situations where you're like, yeah, I mean, nice try, but you are 20 and you got overpowered. Like, that's understandable. But no, you really don't see those. And that just tells you the value of the wingspan that he has, the height, and the instincts that he has too, because that just makes up for a lot of stuff on the court. And being able to tie that all together by adding that strength to his frame this summer, and just continue to absorb information, as you mentioned, the point about how he sees, it seems he does very well when he sees multiple of the same challenge over and over again, whether it's matchups or it's just, he's a fast learner. Like even Luka throughout the season, you could see him kind of talk to him about your timing wasn't right here. Maybe set that screen. He doesn't take that stuff personal at all, and he just goes and does it, and he does it right the next time. And that's, that sounds like a lot of like coaching buzzwords, but it's like that's quite literally a dream of what you would want in a young player.
Yeah, I would dare to say that he's a coach's dream. The way that he is able to go about his business on a daily basis, he wants to learn and wants to get better, and he's earned his way to being on this roster, to being a part of a real major factor for this team. The dependence on him has just been amazing to see. And speaking of Duke, Kyrie Irving, Grant, I go back last year. This team was 5-11 with Kyrie Irving and Luka Dončić playing together. They go 38-44. They missed the playoffs in its entirety. And the question swirling around this team about could Luka and Kyrie fit together offensively? Would Kyrie Irving be the kind of player in person that could fit with this organization? And now Irving is back in the NBA Finals for the fourth time in his career. He had made, of course, his conference finals appearance for the first time in 7 years. And his 36 points tonight, the way that he took over and was able to do his thing as he's always done during the year in the second halves and just taking over ball games, I am marveling at not only his game has always been incredible. He's always had an amazing handle. He's always been an incredible, finisher at the rim. We all know that. But his evolving and maturation as a person and as a leader for this team really has turned into the story for how this Mavericks team has gotten here, and the way that he has grown with Luka, the bond that they have formed. I know it sounds sappy and cute and all this other stuff, but when you start thinking about how a team is put together, I'm amazed that Kyrie Irving has turned himself into veteran leader guy, marrying that with all the talent that he has to turn into what has been an incredible force for this team. And you saw it again in Game 5 for the Mavericks in that way.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because like some of the players that I used to cover that played with Kyrie in Brooklyn, they would always talk about how like hands-on he was with like young players and their development, and like, someone like a Cam Thomas, he was taken under Kyrie's wing, and there's a lot of like stuff like that that people don't necessarily like didn't give him credit for in the past.
Sure.
And there was even like headlines about how his teammates don't like him, or he's stuff like that, where it was like, I mean, I don't think that was, accurate. And I think coming to an organization where you're not going to necessarily have like the, those sort of focuses with the way the team is covered and, things of that nature. Like, I think that goes, a long way for, any star player. I mean, even, like literally any star, any personality, because I mean, there's a lot of media markets where you can be the most bland superstar personality and they'll still try to find, ways to make a problem or whatever. So I think, just he's in an environment where his leadership is kind of got like the greenest of green lights and everyone's followed suit. And I think, even like recent additions, on the roster, like PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, and then, just like the recent, like free agency pickups too. I think everyone just has, embraced the overall identity of the team. No one like speaks in a way where they're like, oh, I wish I had more opportunity or this or that. Like even, someone like Tim Hardaway Jr., he's been a DNP for a couple playoff games. And, I've been around him a good amount before games, and he's just as normal as, like just a normal Tim Hardaway Jr. Like there's no like pouting, there's no like anything like that. And I think that's a strong culture where everyone understands where they fit. And then they also understand, hey, this isn't my playoff series, or they understand this is my playoff series and I have to rise to the occasion. So I think, that all kind of, I mean, I don't think it's fair to give credit to like a single person. That'd
Sure.
be kind of weird to do that. But like, I think Kyrie Irving plays a big part in the overall culture, of the team. And I think, things that we don't see or don't hear, I'm sure, there's all kinds of other, positive influences as well too.
Here's Kyrie Irving talking post-game about what it means for him to be back in this situation, reaching the NBA Finals after a long journey to get back there.
Feels great, man. Definitely don't take this moment for granted because of how hard we had to work to get here, and we had to earn our spot into the NBA Finals. And we had to go against some great opponents, OKC, Clippers, Wolves, and I feel like they got us better as a team. They really challenged us on the defensive end, made us focus in, and I thanked every single one of them like I did the previous two series for making me better. And it has been 7 long years, but it's also felt like the right amount of time, in order to reward myself, be in the locker room with my teammates and enjoying it. A long time coming. So we are going to enjoy this, but we obviously know this is just a pit stop in the journey, and we got to get ready for that court turning gold, as I like to say. The shoes turn gold, the jerseys turn gold, and as a kid, that's what you dream of, getting to is the finals and being able to play against the best of the best with the whole world watching.
And Kyrie Irving's going to see a familiar foe. There'll be plenty of talked about during the lead up to the NBA Finals. And, of course, he's playing one of his former teams in the Boston Celtics. And the Celtics are ready for him. Celtics fans, I should say, are ready for Kyrie to make his return to Boston.
I think their media market is one of those media markets that I was talking about earlier.
Exactly. They are definitely one of those markets that you were talking about. I mean, Kyrie hit 17 points in the second half, was spectacular. And, one of the other storylines, again, we'll get to as we, lead up to the finals, especially with the return of Kristaps Porzingis, for Boston, as he's coming back from, his calf injury he suffered in late April. That's another interesting storyline in all this, that Luka getting to his first NBA final, Porzingis getting to his first ever NBA final, and the journeys that they were intertwined with while they were here. Again, we'll get to plenty of that throughout the course of the next week. But for Kyrie and this team, it's interesting because we talk about Luka, we talk about Kyrie, we talked about some of the other guys with Lively and Gafford. I want to tie this in with Jason Kidd because, there were certain buttons that Jason Kidd pushed, throughout this series and in the postseason so far that have just clicked. And one of them was the Jaden Hardy button that he continued to push at various times, whether it be in this series against Minnesota or in the Oklahoma City series against the Thunder. Jaden Hardy has come in and has become a real playoff contributor and has blossomed in front of our eyes. And the reason why I mentioned Hardy, because for Jason Kidd to now have this team back in the NBA Finals, where 13 years ago he was a player leading, helping with Dirk Nowitzki win a championship. Now as a coach, he has now put this team in position to do so. He gets a lot of criticism for the way he either handles himself, the way he may answer some questions, or the way he may comport himself on the floor. But I thought there was one moment, Grant, in Game 5 that really told me that he understood the moment and the sense of urgency. Derrick Jones Jr. and Rudy Gobert had a little, conversation, if you will, after Jones had blocked one of Gobert's shots. I guess Jones and Gobert had some words, and they got face-to-face, and both of them were assigned a double technical. But as they go to the timeout to review it, you see Jason Kidd giving one of the referees an earful, and you can tell that he is into this game, sticking up for his players, and that has been one of the criticisms of Kidd, is that, hey, maybe sometimes he doesn't do this or sometimes he doesn't do that. I think he has been absolutely spectacular in this postseason, and I thought Game 5 was a moment for him to really show that he's come a long way as head coach of this team and now has got this team in the NBA Finals. What have you thought about Jason Kidd and the way that he's performed for this team and leading them to the NBA Finals here?
Yeah, I think if you review all the series that they've had, up to this point, I think, I think they've had a very, sound approach in terms of like the lineup combinations they've used. Sometimes injuries have put them in situations where they played like we talked about it, where, like playing 4 guards at one time is probably not ideal against a team like Minnesota. Well, I don't think we saw that. And then when they were healthy, playing, Maxey instead of riding him, for very long stretches at the 5, which, I mean, like, you're not going to be able to coming off an injury, but regardless, I don't think that was going to happen.
Sure.
Like playing him next to, like at the 4 next to, Gafford and, Lively, I think, was, very solid. And I thought, offensively, they've done a good job of, I think it's a season long multi-year effort where you're getting the most out of some of these guys as well too. And just like the intent to play fast, that's been helpful. Keeping turnovers down. That's something that we've, mentioned. Like you can't give live ball opportunities for, the other team. And then, just the general commitment for, the team and key players like Luka has taken more catch and shoot shots. I don't think I've ever seen a game or a stretch where, I mean, the last 3 games he's had multiple makes. I'm not gonna act like I know that stat. Like I have no idea if that's happened before, but I feel like it hasn't happened very often. So like just the overall like direction of the team where everyone's adapting to what they need to do to fit like optimize everything they need to optimize, and then getting the most, I think you should say as well, of or could say defensively of the superstars.
Yes.
Like if you were to, in a vacuum, like many months ago, analyze the Mavericks as like a national media person, you would say, oh, well, how is Luka and Kyrie going to guard in the playoffs? That team can only go so far because of this, and this. Well, like he mentioned after the game, now they're like competing for like who's playing better defense. And that's your superstar backcourt, who are like 2 of the most brilliant offensive players in the NBA. And that, like, when you have them playing next to, guys like Derek Jones, PJ Washington on the wing, and then the rim protectors we talked a lot about, I mean, that's why they're in the NBA finals. Like you have to guard, you have to take care of the ball, and then you have to have, offensive firepower. And basically everyone falling in line of their roles has made the most of that. Like even in a identity shift mid-season, that's the most impressive part to me too, or not most, but one of the most, where they were a team that was still really 3-point reliant at the start of the season and for many months. But now they're like kind of like pounding the paint, if you will, getting, downhill, using the lob threat. And then they have the options to redrive from the wing as well too, and all that's tied together nicely where the defensive identity has kind of set the tone. So I think overall, very solid, coaching performance. I think, naturally any coach is going to have situations during an 82 game regular season where fans are replying or DMing me, how you need to ask about this or that or whatever. How is this player, or how is this not challenged? How is this not called a timeout? So like that's not to say that like any coach is perfect or horrible or whatever, but like I think so far throughout these playoffs, I think it's been, managed well. They've taken care of games, for the most part. I think there was some like where just the like free throw shooting against Oklahoma City still jars me game 4, but like I can't really say like, hey, Jason Kidd, you should have gave them better free throw shooting mechanic advice during the timeout. So, I mean, hard to criticize someone when they're, entering the NBA finals, but I'm definitely curious to see how the whole coaching staff, just as a group, manages to take on this task of the Boston Celtics. Because that's the playoffs. I love the playoffs because it's just like a chess match. You just, Kyrie Irving brings that up a lot, uses that term a lot. And, just seeing like how you approach, exploit weaknesses of the other team, how they respond, how you respond to them responding, and all that stuff. And against a team like Boston, that's going to be very challenging. And we're going to get a really good indication of just how, creative this coaching staff can be against a team like that.
Well, if they get anything like they got from the superstar and Luka Dončić, who loves to rip the heart out of opposing fans, they're going to be in for one hell of a treat. In fact, Luka Dončić talking about that very idea because, of course, the Mavericks are going to start games 1 and 2 on the road in Boston. Luka Dončić talking about how he has been able to perform in these moments like this he did in Game 5. Take a listen.
We've seen you do this before in Phoenix, where you just kind of rip the hearts out of the crowd on the road in the elimination game. What is that? How would you describe that feeling to demoralize the crowd on the road in this situation?
It's a good feeling, man. I can't lie. Just go out there and, it's us against them. Just stay together. But that feeling is great.
And they're going to need that mentality against the Boston Celtics. Again, we'll preview more of the finals as we go deeper into the week. But there's a couple of things that struck me when you talk about this team. Number one, they don't quit. They don't give up on games. This is a team that, the Lakers only have, one more win than the Mavericks did during the clutch this year. They had 24 clutch wins. The Mavericks had 23. But they don't give up on games. This team in the last final 5 minutes of games have played with a lot of poise and a lot of calm down the stretch of most of these games. And you mentioned it, and I think it's something that has to be talked about much more is it is so difficult to remake your team's identity on the fly at the trade deadline. Like ideally, when you make deals at the deadline, you hope that you get that kind of success to be able to make a run in the postseason. Rarely does it work out that you get the moves that you made if you're the Mavericks to have the kind of real impact, because we talked about, the Lively draft pick, but where would this team be without Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, who knocked down a ton of important threes in this series? He was the one that hit the free throws to be able to win, the series against Oklahoma City. We're talking about these two guys who've made the difference. I give a lot of credit to Nico Harrison and this front office, who have been criticized through the first couple of years of their regime about some of the swings that they've taken, but ultimately they've gotten it to a point, and more importantly, willing to pivot when something wasn't working. Because remember, Mavericks fans, Grant Williams used to be on this team at the beginning of the year. The Mavericks decided to pull the plug on that and move on, and they got PJ Washington, maybe a little bit more expensive than what Mavericks fans may have thought. But that really doesn't matter right now, Grant, because they're in the NBA Finals because of some of the moves that they were able to make, especially at the trade deadline.
I've just got to really focus on what you said about it being a long year. When I promise I have a point with this, but I remember during global games, this is how long it's been. I think it was like October 5th, something like that. And Grant Williams was sitting next to me waiting for his press conference. And I think Tim Hardaway Jr. was supposed to come and do it with him, and was talking to me about his fantasy team. Him and me and like a couple other people. We're just talking about fantasy football. That is how long Grant Williams was talking to us about fantasy football. That is how, and the team that he drafted or whatever. Like that is how long ago or how long this season has been. And yeah, that man has not played on his team in many months. So just the progression of how, all this stuff is kind of unfolded as well. Like there's a lot of things of just like they come off like to some about like, oh, I don't know how important that might be, but like having a full training camp even for Luka Dončić and Kyrie Irving. Like yes. Luka went off in the last summer, or like this off season, and there was a focus on conditioning. I mean, he played through the World Cup. And that's why I went and I asked him about stuff like, how could this benefit you? You're playing off the ball more because of like injuries to your national team. Like you have Vlatko Čančar's out, so he had to play more on the wing. And they were running off ball actions for him, similar stuff to what the Mavericks are able to do now. And he was taking more catch and shoot shots, and he was working on his catch and shoot jumper throughout the off season and then applying it then. And, we brought it up now, like, all this stuff kind of ties into one another when, you're kind of taking advantage of developmental opportunities, even as a all NBA first team player, and then applying it. And then, that was during like August and September when Luka was playing and being able to benefit from that. And then the training camp hits. The whole team is able to, continue to build that continuity and that chemistry that they weren't able to have the opportunity to do in the previous season when they went 5-11, as you mentioned, with their 16 games together as a tandem. But then the fact that, like, even like Derek Lively earning that starting role before this season began was fascinating. But then also that's the other thing that I think we should really like highlight too, is the fact that his humility and his ability to be like, oh, okay, we're struggling, you want to put me on the bench? Like, how many 20-year-olds would be okay with starting like all year besides like the first game, and then be like, oh, okay, I guess I'll come off the bench now? Like so many like players would have like an ego about that. But, the selflessness of that, like where he's able to, have a positive mindset, contribute to the team, and just all these things kind of tie into one another where you're all mentally focused on the same goal. And then, things over time with patience, kind of round it out. And then, as you mentioned with the trade deadline, there's a big difference between trading for an all-star starter and, depleting depth, because that's how you have to make that trade at a trade deadline the year prior, versus, all right, this is our identity, and now we need to just fill holes. And that's just kind of a testament to the summer that they had with roster building as well too, where Dante Exum, he hasn't been as much of a factor obviously in the postseason, but like regular season he was fantastic. Derek Jones has been fantastic in both settings. and being able to plug those roster holes, with talents like that on prove it deals, 2 out of like what, 8 or 9 players, or really 9 players that are on the court. 2 of them are superstars that you're going to have, and then your rookie center that you draft in the lottery. So that's already a good chunk of your rotation, and then you're going out and optimizing the rest of that group by making trades at the deadline. It's been very impressive, like organizational like process and building over the last while. And I think all that just ties into being starts with being patient, having the same goal, and being willing to being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, again, like Luka used to turn down catch and shoot jump shots and take step back. Like now he's like, in the ball is either offensive rebound or just popping around in the half court, and he's hitting those shots and making the defense pay for loading up on Kyrie at the nail and stuff like that. And having a teammate where they're drawing that attention is like not something that we're used to in the grand scheme of the Luka era, as well as like them drawing blitzes and he's like a back screener and Spain pick and roll and stuff like that. Like, it's just a very interesting team, and that's no wonder why they're in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Derrick Jones Jr., a guy that was literally the last signing to this team for a roster spot, earned everything that he got, and has turned to a tremendous member of this team. Once Jason Kidd inserted him and Daniel Gafford in the starting lineup, this team took off defensively, and they haven't looked back since. And as you mentioned, that is why this team, in a number of ways, whether it be the contributions of Jaden Hardy, Josh Green, who's had his moments during this postseason as well, this team collectively sacrificed to be able to get themselves to this point. And they are a team that went through a hell of a tough West to be able to get here. And now they're going to be taking on what was the best team in the regular season, at least in the East, in the Boston Celtics. And the Dallas Mavericks are in the NBA Finals for the first time since 2011. I have to keep saying it over and over again because of just how much this team has gone through to get to this point. But we will have plenty of coverage, obviously, as the eyes of the basketball world descend upon Dallas for these Dallas Mavericks throughout the course of the next week and leading into the NBA Finals when they take on the Boston Celtics in Game 1 on Thursday night. That game will tip off at 7:30 p.m. Of course, I'll have the pregame show on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network at 7 p.m. But we will have so much coverage, plenty of podcasts. Don't worry, we're going to get a bunch of our friends who have been covering this team all season long to be joining us here, maybe a national guest or two, so just stay tuned for that. It's going to be a lot when it comes to Inside the Mavs, but we really appreciate all of you supporting and watching the show and really being able to help us out by supporting the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Grant, tell the folks where they can find you, what you got going on, man.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of written content on MavericksGameDay.com, the Sports Illustrated Mavericks, section, pretty much, team site. And, lots of YouTube content, content with you as well, talking about, this team on Inside the Mavs. And then also like some video breakdowns. And I'm going to have, post-game press conferences and shoot around availabilities. And, I'm sure with all the national media people that will be focused on, both the Mavericks and the Celtics, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that, for those press conferences and availabilities. 2 days off between every single game. That's something
right.
Like, I don't know, like for people that are watching on TV, I'm sure it's exhausting as well when you're watching your favorite team and all that stuff play every other day. But like, I am so glad that, that there are 2 days in between. Like, I was almost like with this game, I was just like, I really got to go back to Minneapolis. Like just, like every other day there's a game. Like it's not tough, but it's like one of those things where it's like I'm definitely, I will take the 2 days in between. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I will see me some Boston. Not really. I'll be doing lots of film stuff on the channel. So my full name, Grant Afseth. You can check that out as well.
Yeah, please check out and follow Grant's work. He has been covering this team literally around the world since the beginning. I'll even go back to, in the summer, he's been with this team from Summer League all the way through now to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I've done every single game of the Luka and Kyrie duo era. I pulled up at USC to that press conference, and then basically was like, just showed up everywhere ever since.
So definitely follow Grant. He's got tremendous coverage covering this team. He will be traveling throughout the course of the NBA Finals as well. Follow him on Twitter at Grant Afseth for all of his work on YouTube as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to the Inside the Mavs podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating. Write a review for it while you're there. If you watch this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video. And, of course, I'm your Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Every pregame and postgame for the Dallas Mavericks. And, yes, now in the NBA Finals. It should be a hell of a ride as we get you ready all the way up to game number 1. And we'll see if the Mavericks can win their second championship in franchise history. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, the Mavericks find a way and crush their way, I should say, to the NBA Finals, taking out the Timberwolves in 5 games, winning game 5 on the road. Luka Dončić, your Western Conference Finals MVP, as he now makes his first ever Finals appearance. For Grant Afseth, my name is Kevin Gray. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.